Outdoorsman of Reddit. What is the most terrifying experience you've encountered in the woods? I was backpacking with my dog and about 12 miles from the road and trailhead, so pretty far from people though popular enough that other hikers might be around, though we saw no one all day. About 2 a.m. my dog started this really low deep growl and wakes me up. Turn on my headlamp and see his teeth showing and he's right on top of me. I hear heavy footsteps, black bear, moose, near the tent. I leash my dog so he doesn't tear through the tent and the footsteps move further away, but keep circling my tent. All of my food and toiletries are hung in a tree in a bear bag, nothing in the tent to draw a bear's attention. I clap my hands, something is still slowly circling, not something a moose would do, and a bear might if he wanted food, but I've got nothing and a really big dog with me. I decide to step out of the tent with the leash in one hand and bear spray in the other, yelling, "Hey bear." The footsteps stop. Dog's nose is in the air telling me to look right, but nothing in my headlamp that I can see. Didn't hear anything run off, but it's quiet. I give it 5 minutes or so, get back in the tent, and it starts up again, slowly circling maybe 50 feet from me. Maybe an hour later, I hear the footsteps wander off into the woods. At dawn, I take the dog, and the bear spray, and start looking for tracks. I find a clear path in the leaves that had been trampled, but no tracks. The dog's nose is on the ground, and I follow his lead, and he follows the loop around our campsite. We finally see a few human footprint, not shoe tracks, a regular size, not Bigfoot, bare human foot. Plus, yup, a human turd and toilet paper. Summer hole was wandering around the middle of nowhere, near the tent and circling my tent for an hour or more, and left a dump for me to find. When I was about 15 years old, me and some of my friends decided to go camping at a nearby lake. It was a 3 to 4 hours hike, and the nearest house was maybe 3 hours away. We brought some homemade wine and drank the whole night and ate poorly grilled hot dogs. Life was good. We all shared the tent, so it was crowded as fuck in the tent, but we all fell asleep around 2 a.m. At 4 I wake up because I can feel someone running their hand down my forearm. Not that unlikely that someone brushes up against me since there wasn't any space to move around in the crowded tent. But this is the arm that is facing the tent. So someone touched me from the outside of the tent. I sit up and gets instantly horrified to see that all my friends are sound asleep in the tent with me. I put on my deepest voice and shout, "Whoever the fuck you are, you need to leave." And a manly low voice answers me, "You should pack up your stuff and leave," not threatening or aggressive. Just calmly and in a dead kinda way. By now all my friends are awake and are just looking at me. No words, just pure horror in their eyes. I say, "Okay, we will go, but you need to leave. Hurry up." When we get out of the tent, this man, who is fucking huge by the way, has taken the little rowboat that was laying at the bank and gotten into it and is just sitting in the middle of the lake and watching us pack up our stuff and trying to get the fuck away ASAP. We had to walk around the lake at our way back and he was just sitting there watching us. We never went back. I was backwoods camping in Canada with my ex. Deep forest. We'd been out there a day or two and hadn't seen anyone. That evening we were in the tent playing cards and heard something in the bushes, making a giant racket. It was getting steadily closer. It got to the area we were in and stopped. We debated what to do but finally opened the tent, both completely freaked out, and found chickens. 3 chickens, en route home to an organic farm we didn't know was nearby. An after-dark flash flood that roared through camp. 12 of us. 5 of them were sleeping in the canyon bottom. It's amazing nobody died. That was 32 years ago and I still sleep lightly and always pack clean underpants. I grew up in the mountains of New Mexico. I will never sleep in a low spot, like a canyon or along a creek. I will always make camp on a local high. I have seen numerous flash floods and have known multiple people killed in them. 14 years old, moose hunting in northern British Columbia, Canada with my dad. Feet got cold, so I got down from the tree stand to walk around, get the blood flowing, etc. Not 30 seconds later, my dad, very calmly says, "Mike, get back up in the stand." Being a teenager, naturally, I was defiant. 10 seconds go by, I hear, "Mike, get your ass back in this tree stand, right fucking now." Now. To that point in my life, I hadn't heard my dad say, "fuck," like. ever. So I figured, hey, maybe I should listen, and climbed back up the stand. My dad grabbed my face, and jerked my head to the right, where I saw an absolute goddamn unit of a silver-tip grizz charging down the trail towards where I was standing. Another 10 seconds, and I could have been chow, depending on how good a shot my dad would have been. Walking in the pitch black out to a deer stand. So dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Heard some circling around me of something large. It was trotting along. No big deal, figured it was a deer. Then it stopped and let out the most bone-chilling howl I have ever heard. So loud it was like it was inside of me. A few wolves howled back in the distance and it ran off. Needed new underwear. A few years ago, a teenager on the next road over went missing. They said he was autistic, and ran away from home on foot. We're in a very rural area. They had cops and people walking in the woods for a couple weeks looking for the kid, never found him. The following summer, I found a jacket, some empty Pepsi cans, a knife, and a lighter, at the base of a tree in the woods on our property. They came and looked again, didn't find anything else. It was confirmed to be his jacket. Absolute silence. No wind, no animals, nothing. 1 second there were all the sounds of nature, then nothing. Lasted for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. As a Boy Scout, we found a bunch of scorpions in our Adirondack. We ran outside screaming our heads off, and then lightning struck a tree like 20 yards away. We turned on our heels and ran straight back to the scorpions. I have a honey hole about 3 miles deep into the national forest area where I hunt, usually get dropped off and hike in for a weekend. Hogs, white-tailed deer, black bears, panthers all are in the area. I've grown up around it. There isn't much I haven't seen out there. Last November I make the trek back in there and set up my hammock and get ready to camp out for the night so I can hunt from sun up to sundown. I laid down and maybe 10 minutes later hear the most blood-curdling screaming not far off. Bobcats, foxes and limpkins can all sound like screaming, but this was different. There was something about it that just didn't feel right. I sat up and grabbed my binoculars and started scanning the edge of the swamp. Caught a glimpse of what looked like the shape of a woman running full speed away from something about 200 yards out. Now mind you, I'm a good few hours walk from a paved road. Hell, even the service dirt road is maybe a little over a mile behind me, and she's going in the clear opposite direction. Only thing out there is woods and eventually the river. Put down the binoculars and grabbed my rifle so I could use the scope if she was being chased by a bear or panther. Didn't see a damn thing. Absolutely nothing. Brushed it off as something my mind made up. The sun was setting, so I decided to get some rest. Went to sleep clutching my rifle a little tighter than usual. Woke up the next morning and decided to go check the spot where I thought I saw her running. Found smallish barefoot footprints in the mud. Packed my shit up quick, fast and in a hurry. Haven't been back since. I was wild camping and testing out my new hammock. I usually take my dog with me, but as it was a new hammock I thought I'd go solo. I set up just before it got dark. I couldn't get comfortable in it for the life of me, so I get on the ground. UK, so nothing to eat me. Stupid o'clock in the morning and my dog was sniffing my ear. I thought, WTF, is he trying to do its way too early? I remember my dog is at home and bolt upright, turn on a torch and see the back end of a small badger running away. Must have been young. In the morning I see all the signs of a badger run that I was right in the middle of. No idea how I didn't notice it before. I work in the bush and sometimes spend months out there. Most terrifying was seeing a bear start to circle me right as the helicopter pilot radioed me to say he couldn't get to my location because of the weather. Luckily I had a shotgun with me, and eventually the pilot got down to me, but yeah, sitting there in the sleet while watching that grizzly slowly and sneakily try to cut around my position in the fading light was absolutely terrifying. The whole time I was trying to come up with possible ways to keep from being outflanked and to keep visual contact with it in case I had to shoot it. This was in the late fall, so the bear probably hadn't put on enough fat for the year and was looking to supplement it. Spooky stuff. I was wild camping in the middle of a dense forest and at around 2 a.m. I was woken up by a girl crying not too far away. I didn't know what to do, so I just waited. She carried on crying for like 15 minutes and then I heard a guy say, "Oh, come on now, let's go home." I didn't hear anything else after that. It scared the hell out of me. Was in my 20s growing pot in the coastal mountain range of California. Found a trash bag partially buried with a human torso missing its hands, feet and head. Oh my god. This is the worst one. I hope you were eventually okay. I had a bear approach my tent one night while my girlfriend and I were sleeping during a 7-day through hike. When you're sleeping deep in the woods, it's frequently the case that you hear little sounds that seem like big things, then you worry a little as to whether or not what you are hearing is a big animal. With this sound, on this night, there was absolutely no doubting that what I was hearing was a large animal, and it was coming straight for my tent. All my food was hung in a tree nearby, but he must have smelled us. Not only did he come right up to the tent, but he started to sniff at the edge of it. We could hear him sniffing. At this point we were still both in our sleeping bags. My girlfriend was petrified. I banged on the side of the tent and yelled real loud. The bear ran off into the woods. A few minutes passed and we heard him clomping through the brush, headed straight back to our tent. Then there was more sniffing, right at the exact corner he had sniffed at before. We yelled again and off he went running back into the woods. By this point I'd had enough. I grabbed the bear spray, climbed to my feet barefoot and butt naked with only my headlamp and glasses on. I was asleep with my contacts out. I got out of the tent as quickly as I could. When I stood up, I immediately saw his eyes off in the distance. When you're wearing a headlamp, animal eyes reflect directly back at you, but all you see are two bright spots. I picked up a stick and hurled it his direction while yelling, and he ran off. This was all on a section of the PCT in Washington. I was deep in the wilderness, but there were other campers at the lake that we were at. Wouldn't you know it, the other campers started cheering for my goofy naked ass. TLDR, I chased a bear away while shoeless and butt naked in the middle of the night. I've shared this multiple times on here, but it still creeps me out. My husband, kid, and I live out in the middle of nowhere on a plot of land that's about 100 acres. I'd say probably 95 of those acres are wilderness with ATV and hiking trails that we, and several of the previous owners, created by exploring. We use that land for camping, hiking, and hunting. We like to find a spot, clear it a bit, and camp overnight. There's so much space we've never stayed in the same place twice. We've seen some kill sites, both old and fresh. Lots of animal tracks, places where deer bed down, etc. I've even spent a lot of time hiking solo while the kid is in school and husband's at work. Whether alone or with the family, we always carry a firearm for protection. A few weeks ago, we decided to load up our camping gear and start a new trail. We mark the trails we make with spray paint on trees. We were pretty far in the woods, having hiked almost an hour when the atmosphere seemed to change. I don't know who noticed it first, but my husband, who was leading the three of us, turned around and gave me a concerned look. The birds had stopped chirping, the insects were quiet. There were no sounds around us. When in the woods, complete quietness is rarely a good thing. We continued onward, hyper-aware of our surrounds while our kid continued merrily talking. We came to the stream that marks the midway point of our property. We stopped for a few minutes, my husband and I in a stare down with each other. We both felt something was off but didn't want to scare our daughter. I finally broke the silence and said I suddenly didn't feel good and that we should go home. My husband nodded in agreement while our daughter voiced her protest. Too bad, kiddo. We turned around and started back. After going a few hundred yards, still in silent wilderness, I looked to my right and saw a person crouched down in a gill suit about 150 feet off our trail. I'm positive they saw that I noticed them, but they never moved. I cleared my throat to get my husband's attention, and when he looked back, I put my hand on the gun in the holster on my hip, which caused him to readjust his rifle in preparation of anything. I sped up my family and we hurried back home. I told my husband as soon as we were inside. We decided to call the police and report the trespasser. Filed a report and was told to call again if we saw anyone. A few days later, my husband and I went out alone and set up a bunch of deer cams. We didn't go back out into the woods for maybe a week. Then he and I ventured out to retrieve the cam footage. Out of the 9 cams we placed, we caught a person in a ghillie suit in 2 images. We handed copies over to the cops to go with our report. We haven't gone back out since except to check the deer cams. Haven't gotten any other trespasses. It freaks me out even more to think of the few times, while camping, that we heard walking near our tent in the middle of the night. We always assumed it was curious animals, but now I'm not so sure. Edit to add. I know the distance we traveled in an hour wasn't much. We live in the Appalachian foothills, so it's a lot of up and down terrain. We were also clearing a path on land that has never had any structures or logging, marking our trail, and most importantly teaching our then 9-year-old. We frequently stopped to identify animal tracks, poop, bones, plants, and trees. Our kid takes a miniature sketchbook and draws the scat, bones, plants, etc. It's a fun trip without a destination or time limit. Many years ago, when I was about 14, I was hiking deep in the woods behind my house with some friends. We were miles away from home, further than any of us had ever gone before. And we came up to the edge of a clearing, and a little further down the tree line, we saw a lump of clothes underneath an old deer stand. We got a little closer and we could make out legs and arms and boots. They were wet from rain and had been there for a while. Obviously, our first thought was that it was a hunter who had an accident and fallen out of his stand and was dead. We were freaked out, and it took us a little bit to get up the nerve to get a better look. It wasn't until we were practically on top of it that we realized that it was a dummy. We had wandered all the way up to the edge of a big Christmas tree farm's property, and the dummy was part of the decorations from a haunted hayride thing they did. They must have forgotten about it when closing up for the year. We had a good laugh, but we were all scared shitless for a few minutes. Outdoors woman here. Camping out in the bush in mid-North Queensland, isolated area in Australia, hours from anywhere. Heard twigs breaking, birds twittering, etc. I had my pig dog chained up near my ute, made it over there. Looked over and saw a naked man, smiling at me. Let my pig dog off his chain in time, thankfully. Still scared the shit out of me though. I was camping on the Deschutes River by myself one night. It was middle of the week, so I had the campground to myself. There isn't another human being within 5 miles. I drink a few beers as the sun goes down in the canyon. Cloudy night, so no stars and no moon. No campfires since it was well into fire season. Combined with the clouds, this made it essentially pitch black. It's dark and no one can see me, so I put on some headphones and start dancing around my campsite like a Woodstock hippie when my nose catches a faint whiff of something awful. I take off my headphones and hear nothing. And before I can turn my headlamp on, I hear big thundering of hooves, feet, paws, feel a huge whoosh of wind about 2 feet in front of my face, then a loud crash into the bushes next to my campsite. Before whatever had jumped through the bushes even hit the ground, I had ran to my truck, laid down in the trunk and locked all the doors. I didn't move for the rest of the night. Slept in my vehicle, held like 5 beers worth of pee until daylight. When I wake up in the morning, all I can see is a small bit of blood on the tongue of my boat trailer, some sort of prints in the dirt, and a giant 5 feet diameter hole in the bushes next to my camp. To this day I have no idea what happened. My hypothesis is that a deer wandered into the campsite and saw me being oblivious dancing like a fool, but when I stopped moving it got spooked and tried to run into a bush. Must have nicked itself on the trailer as it jumped over it. I don't think my life was ever in danger, but it was terrifying, and not knowing what it was makes it even worse. I go around Australia looking for the most venomous snakes on the planet. Because of that I camp and stay in some pretty remote places, but the weirdest experience I've had was close to home. Was driving on a bush track in a state park that's about 10 minutes from my house. Was about 10 minutes into driving the track when in complete darkness there is a barefoot guy walking with a hammer. He had no light and was walking as if it was the most normal thing in the world. This state park doesn't really connect with anything or anywhere. There are no houses within it, and the closest houses are about 2 kilometers from the entrance. He was nowhere near the entrance. Weird stuff. Camping in WV near Dolly Sods. Had a fire going. Dark. Just chilling with my buddy and talking about life things. Hear 4-wheeler in distance. Closer. Closer. On top of us. Stops near us. Footsteps toward us. Huge dude with long grey beard comes into the light holding chainsaw. Says the following: "That ain't a fire. You need to build a white man's fire." Proceeds to chainsaw down the nearby tree for the next few minutes. Chops up logs. Feeds fire. Nods to us and turns around into the darkness. Drives away. Says nothing else. So no scary throughout, but before he started sawing a tree down. I was definitely freaked out. Dude had a sense of humor. My former friend, whacked out of his mind on mushrooms, decided that we were all about to be eaten by bears and took what he thought were reasonable precautions. His precautions involved propping the bear spray up on the rim of the fire pit so it would be accessible. Due to a lack of basic scientific knowledge, he was surprised when it exploded. Then we had to catch the fool and hold him down while we poured milk into his eyes. Ironically, it sounded and felt like wrestling a bear. Yeah, former friend. Once I went camping and my dog seemed like he needed to pee, but when we opened the tent there were like 30 deer plus pigs surrounding us. You're a Disney princess.